Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Freedom Side Chats. You know how we do it here. And because God is the greatest power, we shall never be defeated. Thank you for joining us. I am excited for another conversation. We're continuing to talk about leadership, how you do it, what you're supposed to do, what pitfalls you may run into, and how to overcome all the trials that you'll face. So I'm glad to have another leader to speak with us today. This is a powerful woman of God who does a lot of great work, and I'm excited to have her on the show today. Sister Shanice Short. She is a marketing director at P&G, and she is the coordinator of Pulse at Greater Emanuel Apostolic Temple. And I am excited to have you on. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Brother Julius, how are you?
Good, good. I'm so excited to have you on. I was looking forward to talking to you when I was making the list of leaders that I wanted to talk to for our leadership I guess, series that we're doing here. You were one of the first things that came into my mind. So
Oh,
I'm glad to have you. Um,
thank you. Glad to be here.
so my first question for you is, and I've been that to the other leaders that I've spoken to, it's been, how did you come into your role of leadership? Like, how did you feel like this is where you were called to be?
Hmm. I don't know if I ever truly accepted myself being called into leadership. I think it was something that I evolved into. The more I gained confidence and the more mature I became. I would say that I've always had a passion to help, always had a passion to do the work. And my inherent characteristics are being a hard worker, having that strong work ethic, and getting things done that needs to be done. So I would say that because of those characteristics and a passion to drive and have ambition to meet any type of goal that is set, has enabled me to fall into the leadership space. And within that space, I pretty much created my own type of leadership style and comfortability, if you will. So I would say it's something that I haven't really accepted to the point where I'm like urgently seeking leadership. I just like to get the work done and do what needs to be done. And putting the work ethic behind that is what allowed me to be the person and leader that I am today.
Great. So from what I'm hearing, you're kind of saying that leadership was kind of a result of what you had already been doing.
Yeah,
It wasn't something that you were looking to do, that it just happened due to what you had already been doing.
correct, correct.
So, how would you communicate that to younger leaders that, maybe for you, it's not to go looking for it, but to wait on it and just do the work?
Yeah, when I talk to some of the young teenagers that I have access to, I believe everybody can be a leader. But that leader isn't based on a title, isn't based on position. It's based on your characteristics and the personality that you have that allows you to drive influence, drive results, and drive towards your goals. So, as long as you have a performance oriented mindset and getting things done, the type of leader that you are and becomes just falls into place where it needs to be. So when it comes to what I would say to young people, it's more so what is your inherent characteristics? What do you love to do? What are your passions? What do you see as being something that needs to be done that hasn't been done in a manner that will get the results that need to be had? And go after the result and go after the intent, not going after the title, not going after the position. That's what allows you to stand out as a leader. And that's what allows people to want to gravitate towards your leadership ability and style.
So, you and going off of that, you and your husband Jesse, who we've had on the show before, are the founders of the Pulse at
Yes.
Greater Emmanuel.
Yep.
And so, how did that come about? Was that similar to what you're saying now, that you saw a need that was there and then you took it?
Totally. Totally. So there was a twofold genesis, if you will, to Pulse. One is when I married my husband, Jesse, I knew that I was gaining a bonus daughter who was a teenager. And I knew that I would one day want her to have an atmosphere at a church, especially our church, where she can come and feel comfortable and meet young people just like her and grow within her own personal spiritual life. So that was the first thing, as inspiration, because we didn't currently have anything available for our young teens that I felt would be suitable or relevant for my
Mm.
bonus daughter. The second part of inspiration was the fact that I had been watching a lot of our young teenagers and preteens navigate around the church aimlessly to an extent because they didn't really know what this thing called spirituality was, what this thing really meant. They could see their grandparents, parents, guardians around them and why they loved coming to church and why they loved their relationship with God and continue to seek after that, but they didn't have that personal urge for themselves. So creating Pulse was an opportunity for us to bring that environment and forum together for us to allow them to become powerful, unified leaders, spiritually equipped, because it's a holistic forum where they can not only learn about the spiritual aspects of what this thing called relationship with God is and salvation is, but they can also grow in terms of being a leader because a leadership characteristic is not just one aspect, it's holistic. And that's what my husband and I, like to provide with Impulse. So I would say the inspiration was twofold. And we were actually able to get our bonus daughter to come a few times to Pulse, which was great.
Okay.
And she felt comfortable. So now we just need to continue to ensure that that atmosphere is not only one that's social, but it's also spiritual and allows the teens to have an informative session each and every time for them to learn something new and different than they otherwise wouldn't have gotten.
Yeah, I think one. Let me tell you all, Pulse is a great group. Uh,
Thank
Great
you.
conversations. Um, I've enjoyed it every time I've gone. So please, if you are watching this and you're a young person, go check it out. Um, Before we finish, we'll have Shanice, whatever, however they can get in touch with that. We'll let you go there, but
Totally.
please get in touch with them. Uh, so going off of what you're talking about with Pulse, so with that group, you probably gotten to know that young people talk, view, and learn about God differently
Yep.
than what we do in traditional church. You
Absolutely.
know? And it can be hard for them, you know, for me and people who grew up in church, pew babies, coming to church, hearing the same, praise and worship songs, shouting and the preaching, that's normal to me. I can
Right.
connect to that. I can take that in and develop my relationship based on that. That
Yep.
doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
They can still come to church, and get what they need, but they need more because
Yep.
that for them doesn't communicate.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how you talk, how the young people that you have the opportunity to communicate with about God, how they talk and feel about God, and how that is different from the traditional sense of church that we all know?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I've noticed about our teenagers and preteens is that they haven't registered the importance of developing their own relationship with God. And because of that, they, in some ways, don't really know how to connect. They can come to church every Sunday with their grandparents, with their parents, with their friends, and sit there and leave the same exact way because they don't know how to lock in to what is happening around them. And it's not to say that those in their lives haven't had conversations about what this thing is or what's happening, why it's happening, but because sometimes the initiative on their own hasn't been there to lock in even further and understand even further and seek to understand and research on their own. That also has been a limiter to them growing their own personal relationship with God. So that lack of connection um, through their own realm and through their own initiative is something different than what I've seen from other generations. Like if I think about myself, we had a lot. of offerings for our young people
Mm.
at our church, but also within a community that allowed us to shape how we think about this thing called spirituality, this thing called
Yeah.
relationship with God. And because there are so many different directions that our young people are getting pulled today, church becomes a deprioritized activity.
Mm.
And then the programming within church has become a lost art. And because it has become a lost art, there's not an opportunity always for our young people, teenagers at large to connect. So, my key thing that I've been helping the Pulse teams understand is I can tell you day in and day out about what my personal experience is and why I choose to believe God and why I choose to believe the word and why I choose to be apostolic. But if you don't have that perspective
Mm.
for yourself, that you've learned, that you've asked questions, that you've sought after, regardless of who you sought after it from, whether it's from a person through the word, etc., then I don't know what else to tell you. And because we're dealing with teens, they're at the age where they can make their own
Yeah.
decisions to the
Yeah.
point where if you're gonna decide to drive, you can decide to get saved. And sometimes that second question is not a question that's top of mind because they don't have that connection as to why it's important. And a lot of that is also driven by the fact that they're dealing with a lot at the young ages that they are. They're dealing with a lot. They've dealt with a lot. So, not really understanding why a lot of those things have happened or why they're dealing with a lot of those things has caused them to be disconnected or distant, and not taking the initiative to develop their own relationship. So, I think that's the difference between my generation and the generation I see today is that lack of initiative and
Mm.
wanting to develop a relationship with God, being actually scared to go to hell, is no longer within this generation, which is kind of scary.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot more to offer to this generation,
Yeah.
even than yours. There is, I mean, the technological advancements that we're making on a daily basis as a society, the amount of content and media that is being
Hmm.
pushed on a consistent in this many different platforms from which you can get it from,
Yep.
all in one phone.
Yep.
I mean, it's so many other things to do than get closer to Jesus.
Right.
You know, there's church for former generations, past generations, was all they had. Like that
Correct.
was their entertainment. That was their life. That was what they did.
Yep.
They don't grow up in that.
Right.
There's so many other things for them to do.
Absolutely.
So I think one thing that I wanted to, get a better understanding of is what do you think? Do you feel okay? First, do you feel like there is like a disregard that people have for these young people and their questions?
Mm.
Like they don't really respect the authenticity of the questions that are coming from them.
I That's another great question, and I would say to an extent, it depends on who they're asking the questions to. So, pulses the ages of are the ages between 11 to 17 or 12 to 18. It sometimes fluctuates because we don't like turning people away who want to participate. And to your earlier point, Julius, my husband Jesse and I have been able to develop a relationship with them even prior to Pulse. So Pulse was a natural transition for them to come into and feel comfortable to ask any type of question that they otherwise wouldn't have felt comfortable asking someone who may be older than us or someone they may not have a relationship with us, or
Absolutely.
relationship with, excuse me, but they're the same age. So that relationship and connection that they could have with the individual that they speak with makes a huge difference in terms of the types of questions that they ask. So if I think about the group at large in terms of who they could be asking questions to, there could be a disregard because they don't have that person that they may be connecting with doesn't have that relationship with them to understand the intent of where they're coming from, and may assume or believe that it's more of it could come from a judgmental space in terms of their response. And that is a huge turnoff for teenagers. It was a huge turnoff for me. I didn't talk to a lot of people. I can name a number of people at our church that I felt comfortable asking in my mind, silly questions, or the questions that I really didn't understand or feel comfortable asking out loud. I had a number of people in the church that I felt I can connect with to ask those questions, that I didn't feel would disregard me or
Mhm.
diminish me or
Yeah.
assume that I'm asking questions because I want to be contrary or rebellious, but they took the intent of my heart and the question that I was seeking to ask because they knew who I was,
Exactly.
and they answered accordingly and helped guide me accordingly. So that's the type of relationship that we strive to have with the young people, because that's what makes them feel comfortable in asking those questions. But when you don't have that relationship with them, then you could come off as being disregarding or very judgmental or having expectations of that said young person, and them not really feeling that same vibe or connection or energy to abide or take what you're saying in both ears and registering what you're saying. So I do think at a large perspective that disregard is there unless you have a strong relationship with that young person.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. How so now transitioning, we've talked about the difference between how they communicate, how they see, how they view God. We've talked about the people around them and how they may be communicating with them or not communicating with them.
Hmm.
You mentioned a couple times now how these young people are sitting in church and not connecting with the service and the movement
Yeah,
that's happening around them.
yeah.
What do you think is missing or is disconnecting, not connecting with them in traditional service?
Another good
That's a
question.
lot. That's a big one.
It is a big one because when I speak to the young people, I think there's two parts. There's the I can't tap in because I don't know what's going on part, so I don't connect. And there's the part where I just don't like it. So
Mm,
not going to connect just because
yeah.
I don't want to connect. Um so if I take it from the I just don't know what's going on, I think what's missing is having more programming and more individuals that are walking across a number of different walks of life to connect with the young people to help pull them along, not push them, but pull them from the standpoint of walking alongside them and helping guide them as it relates to what this thing is. Maybe explaining more things to them because when I was younger, I sat in church too. If I wasn't of age for children's church, whether I was too young or I was too old, I sat with my parents in church and I slept most of the time because
Let's
I
be honest.
didn't
Yeah.
right. I'm like, I didn't know what was going on. I could like listen to the songs and sing along, but other than that, I had no personal connection with what was going on. So fast forward now, I see our teens not only in our church but other churches essentially doing the same thing, and it's because there's not a connection to what's going on with that service. So if we had more individuals who would tap into our young people and actually talk to them, walk with them, help them see what is going on, I think that would help because our young people appreciate genuine authenticity as
Oh, yeah.
well as trusted individuals that they can connect with and rely on who won't judge them.
Mm,
That's a large part of what's important to them for the services at whole. I do think we have, and I'm not speaking specifically about greater, but I think the church as a whole has an opportunity to elevate what we can do to better not only attract because it's not a performance and it's not entertainment, but tap into what may be relevant in terms of topics, what may be
mm,
relevant in terms of style of presentation, what may be relevant in terms of music or creative arts or any type of art that would help connect our young people more so that they're not only just coming to service, they're participating in service, they're active participants. And they can walk away and say, okay, I learned this from the message today, or I didn't really get much from the message, but I got something from this song or that dance that was provided. and it connected with me. Like doing more than just the stereotypical prayer, reading of the scripture, you have your choir, your praise team, and then you go into the message. Like that has the opportunity to do a little bit of damage because it's so predicted. Whereas sometimes spontaneity allows
Yes.
a better atmosphere for
Yeah.
our young people. For those young people that are sitting in service and just don't want to connect, that's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
And I think within that space, you really have to tap into why is that your mindset? What is it that you don't like about either this service or what's happening? Because that's where we need to connect. We need to get to the core of that and figure out what the problem is and then solve it from there, whether it's through programming, whether it's maybe the church is not relevant, because not all churches are relevant for everybody. So maybe it's a matter of getting them in a position and getting them in a place where God needs them to be so that they can receive and not automatically put up a wall and say, I don't like this and I don't like that, just by what they're seeing on the outside, because again, they don't have a connection. So I think the bottom line is connection can help, filling in the gaps with either an individual or really getting to the core of the issue as it relates to why our young people may or may not like what's going on in church, or maybe limiting their activity of what's happening at church because of what's offered, and then going from there to try to solve it.
Yeah, I think, you know, that you brought up how, not every church is built for everybody.
Yep.
Because we don't like to talk about it, but churches have cultures.
Correct.
Yeah, not every church is created or behaves the same way.
Yep.
And that, to me personally, that I'm okay with that. Every you fit your people, you fit your congregation.
Absolutely.
What gets them connected to God,
Yep.
and then allow people to fit in with that.
Yep.
So we're having a great conversation here. Hopefully,
Yeah.
you all are sharing this, commenting, putting your thoughts down on what you think about what we're talking about. What do you think connects with young people? What doesn't? If you are a young person, tell us what connects with you. We would love to hear that as well.
Absolutely.
So continuing here, going back to what the core of this conversation is about is leadership. So as you've learned all these things, how do you yourself now prepare to lead these young people? How do you put yourself in a space where you can connect with them and be that leader for them?
Yeah. It has to start with intentionality. It also has to start with vision. Because if you don't have intention in terms of really what you're seeking to get out of each and every connect that you have with this young person, if you don't have vision in terms of what are you working towards, what is your end goal, then it's all going to be just a regular conversation. So how Jesse and I tend to approach this type of conversation with our young people is starting with, okay, what did we talk about last time? How far are we from where we want to be within our goal set? At the end of the day, we want our young people not only to be saved, we want our young people to have a relationship with God that's going to sustain them after pulse, that's going to sustain them once they get out into college, into the community, into the real world, where they have to really make their own decisions with or without their guardians, parents, grandparents right by their side. So we're trying to build those powerful, unified leaders, spiritually equipped. And in order for us to do that, we have to be holistic in terms of our approach. So that's where the visionary aspect comes in, because we can't just focus on one aspect. Our young people may sometimes only want to focus on one aspect, but we have to remind them, like, hey guys, yes, this is a social gathering and forum, but this is also an opportunity for you all to learn one more thing that you didn't learn as it relates to yourself and how you can connect and lock in with God. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. If we wanted to do a social fellowship activity, then we would have called it something else and did something else. So we really approach it with our personalities as well, as always giving them the honest feedback coming from a trusted source and someone that's not going to judge them, because at the end of the day, we have no heaven or hell to put anybody in. So that's not what we're here for, but we are here to help guide them towards making very holistic decisions as it relates to their spiritual walk with God. So that's to me how we have to approach our young people and how we approach each and every session that we have with them is with intentionality and being flexible. Because sometimes our young people will come in and they have a specific topic that they want to talk about. And it may be totally different from the lesson that Jesse and I would have prepared, but they have a specific topic that's either real time, something that happened in school, something that happened in their life, and we drop everything and talk about it because that has a huge impact on their mental health. And mental health is huge in terms of an opportunity for us to continue to strengthen with our teenagers and with our preteens. So, whatever opportunity, whatever time that we can provide to focus on that and get them to a state where they are comfortable having those conversations, but then also comfortable and being open and receptive to having the additional conversations within the spiritual realm. That's what makes Pulse holistic, and that's what makes our conversations rich with our teenagers.
And we've been doing this show for a little bit now, and especially and in this series specifically, every time Elder Tubbs will tell you, who works with us on this show, everyone that I've interviewed brings up a point about leadership that is central and that you just hear them repeat over and over. And yours today has been vision and intentionality. Those have been your two. And before that, we had humility and integrity. Then we had obedience. And now we have vision and intentionality. And so when you were talking about vision and explaining that, was vision something that you learned somewhere else, like from your day job and then brought to what you do here? Or was vision something that you had to just develop as you started this process with Pulse?
It's a good question, and I would say it's a little bit of both. When I am operating on a day to day basis at my job, if you don't have a clear objective, then you are aimlessly walking around.
For those who don't know, can you kind of do a synopsis of what you kind of do?
Yeah, so I work at Procter and Gamble. I've been there for a little over 12 years. I am currently within their marketing and marketing research department where I focus on developing strategies and developing new and different products that will pretty much serve the entire world.
So you gotta
have vision. You gotta have an objective. You gotta have a clear point of view in terms of how you want to develop that product and how you want to serve the consumer that you're trying to serve and trying to reach. So I liken that same thing when it comes to this space that we're operating in with youth leadership and Pulse. If I don't have a clear goal, if Jesse doesn't have a clear goal and those goals aren't aligned for us to eventually want to have our young people be saved and have their own relationship with God, then this is just a fellowship and it's not going to work. So having that clear vision and clear objective is absolutely something that is important. I learned that at work, but I also evolved it as I connected with the young people. So the first session I had with the young people was, what is it that you want? What is it that you need in order to feel connected to not only church, but to God? And we used that and we shaped the vision for Pulse together. It wasn't me or Jesse self-imposing what Pulse was going to be on them. We had a vision to create a forum for them, and we had a vision that it would be holistic, but how that came to life evolved with the young people based on what they felt would better connect them to what it is that we're trying to connect with, and that being God. So I was, and that goes back to the earlier point on being flexible and agile. If you're a rigid leader and it's whatever you say goes, it's not going to work. It's not going to fly. And I've never had that type of personality. I've always been one that seeks to understand, listen, ask questions, and then use that to guide what it is that I'm trying to do at work as well as at church. And my husband is the same way. So that's how we approach it. And that's pretty much where we gathered some of our inspiration from when it comes to setting up Pulse and helping connect with the young people, was starting with that clear objective and that clear vision and then evolving with them as we see fit.
And that's just wonderful. I think that's how it's supposed to be done. Vision is everything. Let's just get that out there. Leading anything, if you cannot see and you cannot explain, you can have a vision,
Yep.
The next part is, can you communicate that
Correct.
to those who work with you,
Yep.
and offer it to them in a way that they will buy into it.
Absolutely.
People have to buy into what you're talking about and what you're trying to do.
Yep.
And it's not their fault that they don't buy into what you offer. It's
Correct.
probably the way you communicated that vision.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. And then the only thing I would
go
add to
ahead.
that
Go
is
ahead.
not only having the vision, making it plain, communicating it, but also executing it.
Oh,
So don't just talk about it, be about it, please.
oh my goodness. Yeah,
Please be
that's
about
the
it because otherwise you're just talking.
yeah. Because then the next vision, I'm not listening to your next vision
Exactly.
because now
Exactly.
you just throwing out stuff.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah, but I think the one part that I really wanted to get from you was, so you've talked about vision, you've talked about what you had to do to try to connect with the young people, what they wanted. What was a roadblock or a pitfall that you ran into
Hmm.
that you were like, okay, I need to find a way to get through this or around this, and how did you do that?
Yeah, and this is something that I'm actually having conversations with Jesse, my husband, about too, because at the end of the day, we want all of our Pulse teens to be saved. And we've been operating Pulse for about 2 years now. And some are saved, some are not.
Mhm.
And I can oftentimes say to myself, man, this is a disappointment because we haven't met that goal of having all of our teens be
Mhm.
saved. But what I had to learn was this is their own personal walk, and every seed that we're planting is indeed being a seed that's planted, and how it grows can't only be based on what Jesse or I speak about. It has to be also cultured by the environment that they're in. So there's been a number of times where we would have like heart to heart conversations with the teenagers, like, look, guys, what is it going to take for you all to be saved? We brought in relevant ministers for them to speak to, and they're asking the same questions. Guys, you all are old enough. What is it going to take for you all to be saved? And so they just sometimes don't have an answer. And that's sometimes sad for Jesse and I because we're like, "Ugh, what is all this for?" type
Yeah.
of thing. But how do we get past that? We get past that by continuing to be persistent and continuing to take what we know to be true, and that's what's in the Word of God, and giving them that in chunks and allowing them to digest at their level and ask those questions. And I believe every time we talk to them, they're taking that seed that's planted, they're taking something away and getting closer and closer to figuring out, okay, I need to get to a point where I make this a reality. I need to decide, I need to choose God, because if I choose something else, these are the things that Shanice, Jesse, or whoever has told me
Come
is
on.
going to happen, and I would have to sign up for that consequence. But we try to be persistent when we get to those disappointment moments, or when we get to those quote unquote pitfalls where we're not quite like guiding towards our goal, and level set ourselves, ground ourselves, pray, because that's what keeps us grounded and ensuring that we're listening to God and doing exactly what He would have us to do, and getting to that vision and making sure that we're executing it accordingly. But it's hard. Young people are hard, and
Very.
salvation and connecting with them during these times is hard. So I oftentimes also, which is the last point, bring in other reinforcements and bring in other people, just to help them hear it from somebody else, because maybe Jesse and I are the limiters for that day and time, and we need somebody else to come and speak to them. So we're, like I said, we're flexible in trying to figure out how to really make this registered for them to have their own connection. But it's definitely hard. But I'm inspired. I love our young people. Our young people are sharp. Our young people are inquisitive. Our young people are loving. Our young
Come
people
on.
are curious. Our young people just want to be heard.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're able to provide that through Pulse is amazing. But at the end of the day, our goal is to not only have that environment, but for them to be safe. So that's what we're constantly working through.
This has been great. Please share this conversation, everybody. Comment, let us know what you're thinking. That that has to be the goal of anything that you're doing with the truth. That ultimately, everything that you're doing comes to the conclusion of souls being saved. If
Absolutely.
that's not a part of your calculation when you're doing something for the church,
Yep.
what are you doing?
What are you doing?
You need to go back to the drawing board.
Exactly.
So the last question I wanted to ask you before we get out of here is, and I know this is a good question for you, how do you as a leader deal with the saints, with the people of God? How do you keep yourself focused on the vision while still managing the personalities and the minds and spirits
Yeah.
of the saints of God?
Yeah. Like you said, this is another good question. And this has been something that I have evolved with over time because as like say 10, 15 years ago, how I dealt with the saints was what they said went in one ear and out the other. But as I've matured and
Come on.
as I've grown closer in my relationship with God and really seeking to be open to what it is that He would have for me and what He wants me to receive, whoever that may come from, is how I personally been able to deal with the saints. And the saints are really loving too. And you have to take what they're saying and ensure that you understand the intent. The approach may be completely off. But if the intent is right and with the maturity level that I am striving to continue to be on, then what most of them are saying is legit. What most of them are saying is extremely helpful and fruitful for the walk that I have and what I'm seeking to do. So how I deal with the saints is I take a step back and really check my maturity level at that moment and really see what it is that they're seeking to tell me. If I believe it's from God, then I believe that God will let me know from a confirmation that this was what he needed me to know in that moment, regardless of who it may come from. And that's what I also tell the young people because you better believe they're also saying the same thing. Like, so and so came to me and talk to me about the way I was dressing or what I was doing, and I took what they said in one ear and out the other, or I immediately got an attitude, and I'm like, guys, take a step back. Try to ignore the approach and understand the intent. Because if you understand the intent and you really believe that what they're saying is true, they just came at you incorrect, then respectfully hear what they're saying and then go on about your business. But it's about respect. And I had to learn that because I was quick at the mouth when I was younger. But I have matured and I haven't really had a need to act out in any type of manner that would suggest immaturity. So that's also what I try to teach the Pulse teams as well.
So what she's saying, y'all, is don't push her.
Please.
The Lord is still working with her.
I love it.
Don't push her. You have to get, to the heart of it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if they're saying something to you, they meant most likely, vast majority of the time, well.
Yeah.
They think that what they're saying is good for you. Now, some of them were raised differently. The way that the mothers came to them or the way that the older generation used to come to them was more aggressive than they're even coming to you.
Correct.
So to them, they're being nice.
Absolutely.
So, this is another conversation that we'll have at a different time with you specifically about generational differences and, how do you manage those?
Yeah.
How are we navigating that as a body?
Yeah.
But Shanice, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Always good conversation, never a dull moment. So much wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you.
Even though she acts so humble, she has so much to offer, and I certainly rely on her advice. And I think you all should take it, take that wisdom, and use it in your own leadership. We would hope to have more leaders similar to Shanice on here talking more about what you do, how to do it, and the difficulties of leadership. So far, we've gotten some great tidbits. We've gotten how to vision. We've gotten intentionality. We've gotten integrity. We've gotten humility, and we've gotten obedience. Those five things are what we've gotten so far, and we hope to get more major keys to how we do leadership. So continue to join us on this leadership series. Uh, Thank you all for tuning in. Share this, comment, let us know what you want to see, and you know how we do it here. Whose side are you on? I'm on the freedom side. See y'all.